Frank Mallory had been a trucker for nearly 15 years, and he knew the roads of the Midwest like the back of his hand. He loved the freedom of driving long distances, though the isolation sometimes weighed heavy on him. On June 14th, 2002, he was hauling refrigerated goods through rural Kansas, driving along the notorious Route 73, a stretch of highway that locals quietly whispered was cursed. It was close to midnight when Frank spotted her. A young woman in a light blue dress stood by the roadside, her hair blowing gently in the hot summer wind. She raised her arm, thumb extended, a silent plea for help. Frank slowed down instinctively. He hated passing by people who looked stranded. Something about her, though, felt out of place. Her clothes looked dated, almost from another decade. Frank pulled over, rolling down the passenger window. He called out, asking if she needed a ride. The woman nodded silently, her pale face unreadable. She climbed into the cab, and Frank immediately noticed how cold the air around her seemed, despite the summer heat. She said her name was Lena, and she spoke with a soft, almost distant voice. As they drove, Lena spoke in short bursts. She said she was headed home, just outside a small town called Windham. Frank knew the area. Windham was barely a dot on the map, a collection of farms and broken-down barns. He asked her how she'd ended up walking the road so late at night, but she didn't answer directly. Instead, she murmured, "I've been waiting for a long time." Frank felt uneasy. Something about her tone sent a shiver down his spine. Still, he kept driving, telling himself he was just tired. About 20 minutes later, they reached the turnoff for Windham. Frank slowed down, pointing out the faint glow of lights ahead. "Is this your stop?" he asked. But when he turned his head, the passenger seat was empty. Lena was gone. Frank nearly swerved off the road. His heart hammered as he pulled over, searching the cab, calling out her name. Nothing. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. The passenger door had never opened. The seatbelt was still buckled. The cab smelled faintly of lavender, and the cold air lingered. Shaken, Frank drove into Windham and stopped at a small diner to gather his thoughts. When he mentioned the girl to the waitress, her face drained of color. She whispered, "That sounds like Lena, but she's been gone for years." The waitress explained that Lena had died in a car crash on Route 73 in 1974. Locals claimed her spirit still haunted the road, appearing to lone travelers, always asking for a ride home, but she never made it. Frank didn't sleep that night. He sat in his truck, staring out at the empty road, haunted by the lavender scent still lingering in the air. He never saw Lena again, but from that night forward, he refused to pick up hitchhikers. He would later admit to fellow drivers that the loneliness of the road was nothing compared to the terror of realizing you weren't alone at all. For truckers, small-town gas stations are lifelines. bright islands of light in a sea of endless dark highways. But for Mark Dempsey, a long-haul driver with 2 decades of experience, one gas station stop would turn into the most terrifying encounter of his life. Mark had been driving through rural Tennessee, hauling furniture to a delivery site near Memphis. It was past 2 a.m., and exhaustion weighed on him heavily. He spotted a small 24-hour gas station glowing faintly in the distance, the only sign of civilization for miles. Grateful for the chance to refuel both his truck and himself, he pulled in. The gas station was eerily quiet. A single cashier stood behind the counter, and the lot outside was completely empty. As Mark filled his tank, he felt the strange sensation of being watched. The woods beyond the light of the pumps seemed unnaturally still, as though something were waiting just beyond the shadows. Inside, Mark grabbed a cup of coffee and a sandwich. The cashier, a young man with tired eyes, seemed distracted, glancing nervously out the window every few seconds. Mark finally asked if something was wrong. The cashier leaned closer and whispered, "Don't hang around here too long. People have gone missing from this station." Before Mark could press for details, the bell above the station door jingled. A tall, gaunt man walked in, his clothes dirty, his eyes dark and unblinking. He didn't browse. He didn't speak. He just stood by the door, staring at Mark. Mark felt his pulse quicken. He tried to brush it off, paid for his items, and walked back out to his truck. But the man followed. He didn't say a word, just trailed Mark across the lot, his footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. Mark climbed quickly into his cab, locking the doors. He sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm down. But when he looked out the driver's side window, the man was standing just inches away, his face twisted into a grin, his breath fogging up the glass. Mark started the engine, heart racing, but the man didn't move. He just kept smiling. Finally, Mark slammed the truck into gear and peeled out of the lot. The man's figure faded into the distance in the rearview mirror, standing perfectly still in the gas station glow. But 20 miles down the road, Mark glanced at his side mirror and nearly lost control of the truck. For just a moment, he swore he saw the same man standing by the guardrail, watching him pass. Mark never stopped at that gas station again. Some nights, though, when he drove through Tennessee, he swore he could still feel that man's eyes on him, always watching from just beyond the tree line, waiting for another driver foolish enough to stop. For truckers, loneliness is part of the job. Hours stretch into days with nothing but the hum of the engine and the black ribbon of asphalt ahead. Sometimes, a fleeting human connection, like picking up a stranded traveler, feels like salvation. But one such act of kindness nearly cost Eddie Callahan his sanity. Eddie was making a late-night haul across New Mexico when he saw her. a young woman standing at the side of the road, waving her arms desperately. She wore a white dress that glowed under the moonlight, her face pale and desperate. Against his better judgment, Eddie pulled over. The woman climbed into the passenger seat, thanking him softly. She said her name was Clara, and she was trying to get back home after a fight with her boyfriend. She was quiet, almost too quiet, staring out the window, as though something haunted her. Eddie asked where she lived. Clara gave an address about 30 miles away, down an old country road. For a while, they drove in silence, the desert night pressing in on all sides. Then, just as Eddie turned toward the address she'd given, he glanced at the passenger seat. It was empty. Panicked, Eddie pulled over, searching the truck. Nothing. The door hadn't opened, and there was no sign of anyone leaving. Desperate, he drove to the address she had given. An old woman answered the door. When Eddie asked about Clara, the woman's eyes filled with tears. She said Clara had died in a car accident on that same highway almost 10 years ago. Eddie never forgot the chilling cold he felt that night, nor Clara's haunted stare. Even years later, when he drove through New Mexico, he refused to stop for anyone on the roadside, especially if they were wearing white. Highways are long, lonely places. For truckers, they hold not just the weight of their cargo, but the weight of stories. Stories whispered between drivers at diners and truck stops. Stories that make you roll up your windows and lock your doors at night. Whether it's a figure watching from the gas station, footsteps following your rig in the dark, or a passenger who was never really there, the road is never truly empty. If these stories kept you on edge tonight, remember, there are countless more chilling tales from the open road. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next dark journey into the unknown. And if you've ever had a terrifying experience while driving at night, share it in the comments. Your story might just become the next nightmare we tell.